If you ever took a family road trip anywhere in this country between 1950 and 1980, you know the teal blue roof. You saw it from half a mile down the highway. You had been staring at the billboards for the last 100 miles. Stucky's 80 miles, Stucky's 50 miles, Stucky's 30 miles, Stucky's next exit. And when your dad finally pulled the station wagon into that parking lot, you were out of the back seat before the engine stopped, through the door and straight to the candy counter and the souvenir aisle and the rubber alligators and the coonskin caps and the pecan log rolls wrapped in cellophane that you had been dreaming about since the last billboard. There were 368 of those stores in 40 states, 4,000 billboards on America's highways, and a Chicago railroad company shut almost all of them down. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Walking into a Stucky's was like walking into a roadside cathedral. The ceilings were sloped high with exposed wooden beams and chandeliers hanging down, beautiful craftsmanship in a building on the side of a highway in the middle of nowhere. The teal blue shingles on the outside caught your eye from a distance, and once you walked through that door, something else caught you: the smell. The smell hit you the moment you crossed the threshold. Freshly made pecan candy, caramel and sugar and roasted nuts, and something buttery and warm that hung in the air like it had been there since the store opened that morning. Some locations made their candy right on the premises. You could watch them roll the pecan logs behind the counter, and that smell alone was worth pulling over for. The candy counter was the heart of every Stucky's. Pecan log rolls, pralines, divinity, peanut brittle, pecan turtles, everything made with Georgia pecans, real pecans, not some factory substitute. The pecan log roll was the star. A soft white nougat center with maraschino cherries mixed in, wrapped in a thick layer of golden caramel, and rolled in crushed roasted pecans. Sweet and chewy and nutty, and unlike anything you could get anywhere else in America. People bought them by the box. One for the car, one for the folks back home, one more because you knew the first one would not make it past the state line. You would peel back that cellophane wrapper in the back seat and bite into it, and the caramel would stretch, and the pecans would crunch, and you would close your eyes, and the highway miles did not matter anymore. Then the souvenir aisle. This was where the magic was if you were a kid. Rubber alligators, coonskin caps like Davy Crockett wore on television, red drinking birds that dipped their beaks into a glass of water over and over and never stopped, and you could not figure out how they worked. Mexican jumping beans, refrigerator magnets from whatever state you were in, shot glasses with the state name painted on the side, miniature license plates with your name on them if your name was common enough to be in the rack, state decals for the back window of the car, postcards, pennants, toy tomahawks, smoking monkeys, and little red fez hats. It was junk. Everybody knew it was junk, and everybody loved every single piece of it. If you were in Florida, the souvenirs were coconut shell sculptures and seashell wind chimes and dried baby alligator heads with their jaws wired open. If you were in Texas, it was cowboy hats and toy six-shooters with the caps that smelled like sulfur. Virginia had Virginia hams and peanuts. Every Stucky's reflected the state it was in. You were not just stopping at a gas station, you were stopping at a place that knew exactly where you were. And the restrooms were clean. That sounds like a small thing now, but in the 1950s and the 1960s, on a highway in the middle of Georgia or Alabama or Mississippi, a clean restroom was worth its weight in gold. Families with small children needed that. Mothers needed that. And Stucky's delivered it every single time. Gas, candy, souvenirs, clean restrooms, a Texaco flag flying out front. The whole package under one teal blue roof. That was the promise. And for 30 years, they kept it. The man who built all of this was born in 1909 near Eastman, Georgia. His name was Williamson Stucky, but everybody who knew him just called him Stucky. His father was a cotton farmer. The family was not poor, but they were not far from it. Young Stucky went to the University of Georgia to study law. He made it to his third year. Then the Depression arrived, cotton prices collapsed, and he dropped out to go home and help his family survive. Things were bad on that farm. So bad there was no money to feed the mules. The mules would get so weak from hunger, they would just lie down in the dirt and refuse to move, and Stucky had to physically grab them and lift them back onto their feet to get them working again. He hated every minute of it, hated the farm, hated the cotton, hated the feeling of being trapped in a life that was going nowhere, and he was desperate for a way out. A local pecan warehouseman named Fred Bennett gave him an idea. Buy pecans from the farmers around Dodge County and sell them to the processing plants. Simple enough. Stucky went to his grandmother, Cora Lee Williamson, and asked for a loan. She gave him $35. It was every single cent she had in the world, every penny. She handed it all to her grandson because she believed in him. He took that $35, borrowed a Model A Ford, and started driving from farm to farm, buying pecans with a helper named John King. He had a system that was half genius and half insanity. He would spend all his cash early in the day buying nuts, then start writing checks for the rest. That night, he would sell the pecans to a processor and collect the money. The next morning, he would get to the bank before it opened and deposit the cash before the checks cleared. Every single day, reckless and brilliant and right on the edge of disaster, and it worked. In the first year, he sold $4,500 worth of pecans. By 1936, he was moving $150,000 worth a year. He was 27 years old, and he had turned his grandmother's $35 into a small fortune built entirely on nuts. Then he built a little lean-to shack on Highway 23 in Eastman and started selling directly to the tourists driving south to Florida. Pecans, sugar cane juice, syrup, homemade quilts, cherry cider, all you could drink for a nickel. Cars were slowing down. People were stopping, and Stucky realized the money wasn't just in selling pecans to processors. The real money was in selling them one bag at a time to the people driving past his front door. Then he did the smartest thing he ever did. He convinced his wife to start making candy. Ethel Mullis Stucky had no experience making candy, none whatsoever. But she took those pecans and started experimenting in the store. She made pralines, she made divinity. Then one day she tried something new. She mixed white molasses with powdered sugar and roasted pecans, folded in some maraschino cherries, rolled the whole thing in a layer of caramel and crushed roasted pecans, and created the single most famous road trip snack in American history, the Stucky's Pecan Log Roll. That recipe has never changed, not once in almost 90 years. The exact same candy Ethel invented in that little roadside shack in 1937 is the exact same candy they make today. The first real store building went up in Eastman that same year. A second followed in Unadilla, Georgia on Highway 41, another major Florida tourist route. A third in Hilliard, Florida, just below the state line. Stucky had figured out where the money was. It was on the road to Florida. Millions of American families driving south every winter, driving north every spring, and every single one of them needed gas, a restroom, a snack, and something silly to bring home for the neighbors. Then the war came and it nearly ended everything. Sugar rationing shut down candy production. The Unadilla store closed. The Hilliard store was destroyed when moonshiners broke in looking for sugar, and they burned the whole building to the ground. Only the Eastman store survived. Stucky kept the lights on by landing government contracts to make candy for the troops overseas. He traded ration stamps with bus drivers to get them to route their stops past his store. He scrambled, hustled, and clawed his way through 4 years of war with nothing but grit and nerve. After the war, America got on the road, and Stucky's was ready. He built a candy factory behind the Eastman store. He started franchising aggressively. New stores popped up along every major highway heading to and from Florida. They then expanded along the new interstates as they were built through the 1950s. By the early 1960s, there were 368 Stucky stores in 40 states. He had 4,000 billboards lining the highways of America. He ran his own candy plant. He ran his own trucking company. He ran his own sign painting operation that produced all those billboards. He also had a deal with Texaco to be the exclusive gasoline supplier at every location. And he was a genius at picking where to build. He always chose hills or rises so the teal roof was visible from a mile away. He always built on the northbound side of the highway because he figured families were in too much of a hurry heading south toward their vacation to stop, but on the drive home they would pull over for one last treat before the trip was really over. His method for finding the exact right spot was legendary. His granddaughter tells the story to this day. He would start each trip with a cup of coffee and drive until nature called. Wherever he had to pull over, that was where the next Stuckies went. He figured if he needed a restroom after that many miles, so would everybody else driving that stretch of road. He joked that he had more money tied up in billboards than in candy. He said he sometimes lost track of where they all were. The signs would start 100 miles from the store, spaced wide apart, then closer together, then closer, until you were practically on top of the place. By the time you saw Stucky's next exit, you had been reading about it for an hour and your kids were already screaming from the back seat to stop. Even his gravestone looks like a miniature Stucky's billboard, the company logo carved right into the stone. Proud until the very end and beyond it. But the end of the empire came fast. By the early 1960s, the chain had gotten too big for one family to manage. In 1964, Stucky sold the company to Pet Incorporated, the maker of pet milk, for somewhere between $12 and $15 million. He stayed on as head of the Stucky's division, but he was not in charge anymore. The corporate men did not understand roadside candy stores. They did not understand why the bathrooms had to be spotless. They did not understand why the souvenirs had to be different in every state. They did not understand the smell or the ceiling or the roof or any of the things that made people pull over in the first place. Meanwhile, Stucky's son Billy went into politics. He was elected to the United States Congress from Georgia's 8th District in 1967. He was a Democrat, and he served 5 terms through 1977. The family's attention shifted from pecans to politics, and the stores drifted without anyone at the wheel who loved them. In January 1977, Williamson Sylvester Stucky Sr. died at 67. That same year, Illinois Central Industries, a Chicago railroad conglomerate, bought pet milk in a hostile takeover. Illinois Central had absolutely zero interest in roadside candy stores. They wanted the real estate. They started closing locations by the dozen, sold off properties, let buildings rot, pulled down billboards, let the candy quality slide, let the restrooms get dirty. Everything the old man spent 30 years building, they took apart in less than 5 years. 368 stores were gutted down to 75. The oil crisis made driving expensive. Cheap airfares meant families flew instead of drove. The whole world that had created Stucky's, the open road, the station wagon, the slow drive south, was disappearing, and the stores disappeared with it. The founder's granddaughter, Stephanie Stucky, says she gets photographs every week from people who spot an old building with the distinctive teal roof. It's a strip club now, or a pawn shop, or just an empty shell with weeds in the parking lot. But that roof gives it away every single time. Decades later, people still recognize it instantly. The sun came back first. In 1985, Billy Stucky Jr. repurchased the company and launched the Stucky's Express concept. He put candy and souvenir sections inside Dairy Queens and Pilot Travel Plazas, a store within a store. It was not the same as a standalone Stucky's, but it kept the name alive. He expanded to 165 locations. Then the Great Recession closed the candy plant in 2009. Billy retired, and he sold his Dairy Queen operation to Warren Buffett. Stucky's ran on a skeleton crew. It made no profit for 3 years, and only 13 stores were left. The company was dying. Then the granddaughter showed up. November 2019, Stephanie Stucky bought the company and became CEO at 53, environmental attorney, former 7-term Georgia state legislator. She had never run a candy company in her life. But she remembered the Woody station wagon, the back seat, the heat, and begging to stop at every Teal roof. She remembered the pecan log rolls, the rubber alligators, and the smell. And she remembered what her grandfather had built and what strangers had destroyed. When she took over, the company owed 6 figures, had 13 stores, and no manufacturing capability. Another buyer had been ready to purchase the name and sell cheap junk on Amazon. Stephanie said that was not how they would finish. Within 6 months, she was profitable. She found a partner, R.G. Lamar Jr., a third-generation pecan farmer. They bought a candy plant in Rennes, Georgia. For the first time in 50 years, Stucky's made its own pecan log rolls in-house. The same recipe, with Ethel's maraschino cherries and all. 3 years later, sales grew from $2 million to $13 million. They make their own pralines and divinity again. Over 200 retailers carry their products. The rubber alligators and coonskin caps are back in stock. 65 locations and growing. The Hattiesburg, Mississippi store still makes fudge on site, and when you walk in, the smell hits you, and suddenly you're 8 years old again. Stephanie does not want thousands of stores. She wants a dozen perfect ones. Roadside oases, real candy, real souvenirs, a reason to pull over, a reason to remember what road trips used to feel like. His grandmother gave him $35, every cent she had. He turned it into an empire of Teal roofs and pecan candy and 4,000 billboards on America's highways. A corporation from Chicago tore it down. His son kept the heartbeat going. His granddaughter brought back the soul. 3 generations, 1 recipe, same candy, same family, still here. If you ever begged your parents to pull over at that teal blue roof, if the candy smell hit you and you forgot how long you'd been in the car, if you bought a rubber alligator you lost within a week, or a pecan log roll that did not survive 50 miles, if you stood in front of that spinning rack looking for your name on a tiny license plate, you remember Stucky's, and Stucky's remembers you.